Welcome to the Wisconsin Podcast. I'm Craig Sauer. On this podcast, we talk Wisconsin things, everything from media, sports, culture, nature, politics, and more. On today's show, I talk with Appleton Post-Crescent photographer Dan Powers about his experience covering the 2018 Winter Olympics in Pyeongchang, South Korea. Powers, a native Wisconsinite, photographs a wide range of news and sports events, including the Green Bay Packers, for USA Today Wisconsin newspapers. What was kind of the game plan? You're going to the Olympics. What's kind of your game plan going to it? What's your mission? What are you trying to hope to accomplish with your photography there?
You know, I'm just one person, part of a big team. So we had 22 photographers there and numerous editors and even a video team. So really, I'm just trying to capture, the decisive moments, so to speak, from each event. I was looking forward to, if I could come away with a given event on a given day with maybe 4 or 5 photos that I liked, that I was happy with, then I would be satisfied. My goal is just to be able to, the photographers that are on our team are such high level. This is my third Olympics, my first Winter Olympics, and just to be able to hold my own with them. I mean, they're very, very, they're the best at what they do. And so that is always a goal, is, the challenge of keeping up with your colleagues. And then, of course, the competition, too, which that just makes it exciting. It keeps you on your toes. But just to do good work in general terms, I guess that's what I hope to get out of it, just to do a solid piece of work.
You mentioned this was your first Winter Olympics.
Correct.
Did that pose any new challenges? Obviously, the weather is a little bit different.
Yeah, that was a challenge from the beginning, because how you prepare for it and what you bring are different. The camera equipment that I brought was very similar to a Summer Olympics, if not exactly the same. But, you don't know for sure if you're going to be covering all indoor events or all outdoor events or a little bit of each. I learned based on, what happens to our crew. It happens at every Olympics where someone might get sick or hurt or something like that, and then we have to shift around. So thankfully, I packed for, if I was going to be doing a lot of outdoor events, plenty of extra socks and layers and, different jackets and boots and all that sort of thing. And then also lighter wear for if I was just going to be shooting skating type events. And that way you're prepared for anything that comes your way. So that means you just have to bring a lot more, more suitcases and that sort of thing. That would be the difference compared to a summer one, which is, all warm weather.
I know you shoot Packer games.
I do.
Did that prepare you at all for some Winter Olympic outdoor winter activities?
Yes, it did. As an example, for the opening ceremonies, the stadium is an open stadium like Lambeau Field. So we had a group. We didn't have all our photographers there. I think we had about 8. And there's different positions. And one of them was going to be as high on the, basically the roof, not the roof, but the highest level up at the top of the stadium. And I was joking the other day that I knew that the photographer that we had from Arizona was not going to be the guy that they were going to select for that position. It was going to be someone who works in a colder environment normally. And so I kind of expected it, and that was me. So I was at the rooftop a couple of hours before the ceremony even started in the position that we had there. And, the temperatures were cold, but it's the wind that gets you. I mean, the wind there will slice right through you. I think they even call it like a slicing wind. And that was cold. But by the time things got going, I don't know if it was adrenaline in me or what, but I didn't, I wasn't even wearing gloves for half of it. And I think my colleagues thought I was nuts, because when we all came down, everybody's pretty much frozen. And I came in with warm hands. And, part of that was preparation. And the other part was that I guess I'm just used to that type of temperature.
Can you talk about a little bit about how covering the Olympics is maybe different from other sporting events that you've done, like covering Packer games? How is it different? How do you have to approach it differently?
Well, for one, when you do the Olympics, these are sports that you don't exactly cover on a day-to-day basis. I don't cover curling, And I work at a daily newspaper in Appleton, Wisconsin. So, I cover a lot of prep sports and some college sports and the Green Bay Packers. But these are all normal to us as far as your, typical sports like baseball and basketball and football. So, you have to kind of research it and get a little bit of understanding about a sport that you may be covering. Some people research it way in advance. Some people do it a little bit beforehand. I do it a little closer to the event, so it's a little fresh in my mind. And also, if I'm at an event where there's a photographer who is experienced doing this, then I'll basically pick their brain. I'm like a sponge. And as an example, I did figure skating, and there's a photographer at USA Today. He's a staff photographer, and his name's Bob Deutsch. He's done 17 Olympics, and he's done a lot of figure skating and a lot of gymnastics. And I worked with him in Rio on gymnastics, and he was just a wonderful source of information. And so when I knew I'd pair it up for ice skating for a couple of days with him, I did the same thing, and I just basically shut up and listened. And the neat thing about Bob is that he will point things out to you to help you, but he won't point everything out to you because he wants you to bring your own vision to it, and he doesn't want to give you all the answers so that you can stay fresh and unique with your images. So it's a good balance. So I learned a lot from him and used that to my advantage. So that was really helpful. But again, it's you're preparing for a lot of sports that you normally don't cover, so that's the most challenging part. The other part about Olympics compared to other sporting venues, let's say like high school or college even, it's where you can go is very limited. So there's areas that we can go, and within those areas, we have areas that we can move to. So you have to be as creative as you can in a limited amount of areas that you can actually position yourself, and that can be challenging at times.
I imagine there's a lot of other photographers covering the Olympics. Obviously, it's the Olympics.
Yeah.
So what's it like kind of behind the scenes, behind the camera? Are there a lot of people like next to you? Are there a lot of people competing for the same shot? Where do you fit in the mix of all the photographers that are covering the various events?
Well, it's kind of shoulder to shoulder. We have areas, they want, the Olympic organization and everybody for that matter want us to be able to get good images and nice clean backgrounds as best they can. And so those areas that are laid out for photo positions are done, months or if not years in advance. Probably months in advance. And, we each photographer is a little bit different. We actually have Ethernet lines at all events in the photo positions. So rather than me photographing the whole event and then downloading the pictures to my laptop and then transmitting them back to the paper, I actually have an Ethernet cord plugged into my cameras. And I'll take some photos and I'll look at them and then I'll what we call tag them or mark them. And when I do that, it sends just those images to an editor who's at a computer waiting for the photos, and they will caption and crop them and tone them and all that sort of thing. So there's certain photographers who have that stuff because their companies decided to invest in that, and then others that do it like I would normally do it with a laptop right next to them. So you want to get there early so that you can get within that area to photograph the best, in your mind, the best position that you can get. So I was arriving at events 2, 3, 4 hours in advance. Actually, not even 2, usually 3 or 4 hours in advance, so that I had the pick of what I wanted within those 50 or 80 positions that might be at a given venue. So there's a lot of hurry up and wait. You spend a lot of time on buses and getting to venues early and getting your spots and then waiting for the events.
So you're there early. What do you do while you wait?
Well, actually, some of it is, the athletes are practicing. And, I'm actually, once I'm set there, I usually wait. If there's someone else there that I know that I can trust, that I could leave my camera equipment there, you got to be very careful of that. I will walk around and see if there's any other places. One of the things with the Olympics is that what you can do, other than the designated spots, is you can go, if there's no fans sitting in a certain spot, then you can shoot from that position. My problem is there's a delay in sending your pictures because you have to get back to your Ethernet cord. So I'll poke around and look at different angles and that. I actually got one of my favorite photos from speed skating while the teams were warming up, and these were the rings were within the ice, and they were the multicolored rings, and the skaters are going by sort of drafting each other. So they were tightly knit four skaters. And I basically focused on the rings. And then as they would come by, I picked a slow shutter speed. And what that does is that kind of mimics the motion of skating. And I had tried it a couple days before, and there was only one or two skaters. And so I made use of my time when I knew I was going to be there a second time to kind of improve on that photo. And so I fine-tuned it and got probably one of my favorite pictures of the games, which was actually during the warm-ups. But, some people read, some people just chat with other photographers and kind of meet other people, that sort of thing. But, your goal is you need to get the best photo you can. And part of it is you just kind of have to suck it up and get there early and wait it out.
Is it competitive with other photographers, either ones that you work with or ones that you just know from around covering the events? Are you trying to get the best image? Are you kind of trying to get that gold medal photograph?
Oh, every time I go out, but that's no different than when I'm here in Appleton. I've got the girls' state basketball tournament coming up starting tomorrow, and my efforts will be just the same in that as if they were, if I was at the Olympics. I'm always trying to do the best work I can. But we're aware of other entities that we want to, be able to be competitive with and put out the best images we can. Now, at each given event, there are pool photographers, and so their positions are slightly different. They, would be shooting, for the Olympics, and so they always get a little bit more access, a little bit better angle, and so the goal is to be able to compete and get just as good as images as those guys with maybe not the as ideal of photo position that they might have or access that they might have, which isn't easy to do all the time.
What event did you find was the hardest for you to shoot?
I found that curling was actually the hardest for me. But I should preface with it that I did injure my knee about the third day into the games. So, that wasn't on my game plan. But I found out when I got back here that I sprained my knee. And so whereas originally I was going to be doing some indoor events and then some outdoor events, kind of mixing it up, I like a variety of things, and they've always given me a variety of assignments in the previous games. That limited me to what I could do because I didn't want to, and neither did they want me to be trying to do alpine skiing where I'm climbing up an icy mountainside, with a bad knee. So we had to make some adjustments, and what that meant for me is that I shot mainly indoor events. I did do bobsledding, which was an outdoor event, but for the most part, mine were all ice-related and on even ground, so I wouldn't aggravate my injury. And, it was painful throughout the thing, but that was more of when I was just sort of traveling to and from the events. Once I got there, I was more stationary. So for me, you'd think like alpine skiing would be most challenging, but I didn't photograph that sort of thing. So curling is difficult in that they actually have 3 to 4 matches going on at the same time. And so if you can imagine, there's all these TV cameras, and then there's officials, and then there's teammates, and there's coaches, and, to some extent there's fans in the background. And you're just trying to get a clean photo, maybe with the rings in the background of a given athlete on a given team. And just when it's all coming together, you're kind of shooting maybe the third area that they're in, and the people who are playing on the second often walk into the view of your picture and ruin your photo. And, they're just competing. But so it's kind of like dodgeball, because there's 4 things going on at one time. You're really only shooting that one at the time. And the other challenging thing is, I should correct myself, is, for instance, I was photographing the United States curling, but there were also 2 other matches going on, and they wanted photos from the other 2 matches too. So I needed to get pictures from 6 different teams all at the same time, with an emphasis on the United States, of course. So that's challenging because you're trying to make sure, did I get, these folks from this team? Do I have enough for this one? There's never too much, but make sure you don't forget anything.
So you got to see the one of the highlights of the Olympics, which was the curling.
I did. I did men's and women's. The men's, as far as the United States goes, I photographed them through. I got the last game I did of them or match was the one that put them into the gold medal match, which was I enjoyed because at the end they were very, they were celebrating quite a bit and very expressive, and I was able to actually get a photo with all 4 players in the frame at the same time celebrating. And that's not necessarily an easy thing to do because they might not be right next to each other at the moment that they're like, hey, we won, And fortunately, it worked out for me. And then my final event for the whole Olympics was actually the gold medal women's curling, which the United States wasn't in, but it was really exciting because Korea was in it. So the crowd was just, over the top.
Now, I imagine in events like downhill skiing and things like that, you're not going to be up close necessarily with a lot of the athletes or be in a situation where you can have a conversation with them per se, but maybe curling is different. Maybe you're in a situation where there's maybe some exchange. Do you have any exchanges with athletes while you're in Korea?
Not really. There's a warm-up area, the area where the curling athletes come out, and it happens to be one of the photo positions is basically right there. And so I did some pictures of the guys kind of stretching out and that sort of thing. But, they're there for a purpose. They're competing, and I'm a professional, and I'm there to do my job. And so, I'm not engaging in conversation. I suppose in that case, because I'm so close to them, I could, but I choose not to. I don't think that's the most professional thing to do. But then again, if it was just a casual encounter or something, like when I was in China for the Summer Olympics in Beijing, I photographed fencing, and the United States women's team, they swept the medals. And so I photographed that. And I happened to be, after I was all done doing my work, I get in this elevator and the door opens, and it's the woman who won the gold medal for the United States. So it's just me, her, and there's one other person in the elevator. And there, of course I engaged, and we were just chatting, and I said, I got this really nice picture of you. You should look for it. And I told her who I was with and everything, and we just had a nice little moment, and she let me hold her gold medal, which I thought was super cool. So I'm not against, engaging with them at all, but I wouldn't do it when they're like, actually in the moment of competing,
right,
even if it's just warming up or anything. But after the fact, sure, yeah. But this particular trip, no, I didn't have that opportunity.
You were mentioning before one of the things that you had a shot and you set it up, but there's also the shots that you have to get. So I'm wondering how much time you have for experimentation. Trying to take like maybe more of an artsy shot or take a little bit more of a risk in what you're trying to do?
Sure. So there's no rules for us, really. I mean, obviously we're looking for peak action photos and then reaction, whether that's celebration or, someone upset that they didn't win. Those are the standard things that we're looking for. But in between that, we have the green light to really try whatever we want to. I did a little bit more with like speed skating and curling because there's more time to do it. Figure skating was a little tough. I didn't do as much of that because one of the things that is important, which is unfortunate, but with figure skating is that if someone falls, that could be the difference between them getting a medal or not, or their score in general. And I just don't want to be the guy who's playing around doing the artsy, blurry motion type picture, and then, in the moment that they fall, and that was the difference between them getting a medal or not, and that's the story of the day, and I don't have a sharp, in focus thing of them falling. So I do a little bit less of that. But for speed skating, that I would literally, they come by a couple of times the first lap, I might just make sure I get a nice, clean, in focus picture, maybe the rings in the background or something along that lines, and then the second time they come, I might change my shutter speed to a slower shutter speed, which shows more of the motion, and for lack of better words, is more artsy, or try a different lens that maybe I wouldn't normally use. That's not so close up. Maybe it gets more of the sense of where you're at, the venue itself. So, you have a responsibility to get storytelling images, but then after that, at least that's my opinion, then after that, then you can try to create other things.
I want to ask you a little bit about how photos are chosen to go along with an article or whatever it may be, whether it's in the newspaper the next day or online story right away. Mm-hmm. Do you work with the sports editors on picking out the shots, or do you just kind of like give them like you were mentioning before, like a handful of options and then they pick? How does that work?
Well, yeah, you said it right there, actually. I do work with them, or we work with them, but not in the way you would think where like, hey, I sent you those 5, I really like this one, and they might say, well, the angle of the story is not that the person fell, but they still had an awesome score despite the fall. And so that picture that you have of them smiling and celebrating would tell the story a little bit better. And that's not the case because they will be editing, more than one photographer's take at a time, and they have to move things, with everything being on the web, it's almost instant. So what we do is, let's say I shoot 1,000 pictures at a given event. I don't send them 1,000 because obviously that's too overwhelming. So I pick and choose my favorites as I'm going. And it's at a very, very fast pace because an example of figure skating, what I do is I take a photo of the screen that has the person's name, and I send that so that they know, okay, all the pictures following this will be of this skater. And then I shoot, their program. And then while the judges are judging and the next skater is getting ready to come out, I'm literally flying through my camera in reverse order, looking at the photos and sending the ones that I like. And so those, maybe there was, for one skater, maybe there was 200 pictures, and I maybe would send 6 or 7. And then they would look at those and then determine which would be the best ones to send. They might send 2 or 3. Or I would say by send, I mean they make them available to the other newspapers and that sort of thing. I don't see the final decision process of what photo, but I certainly have input to it because I don't send them all my photos.
One thing that this brings up in my mind, I'm assuming when you're shooting events in Wisconsin, like a girls' basketball game, like you're going to be doing, you probably edit those photos yourself. Would
Correct.
that be accurate? So you in this situation for the Olympics, you're kind of giving up a little bit of control to somebody else to do the toning and things like that. Is that hard for you to do, to kind of give up that aspect of like fine tuning your photo?
It was the first time. In Beijing, I edited on a laptop and I cropped and toned and captioned everything and then sent them, again, narrowing it down to maybe 5 or 6 of a given thing. And then they would go from there. But I got to, crop them and tone them and do everything, so that they looked the way I would like them before I sent them. Then Rio, we started doing it with the Ethernet cords. And so it was a little hard for me to let go of that control. I mean, I try to shoot the way I want the image to go, but sometimes, many times you're looking at like, I think I want to be in a little tighter, so I'll crop a little bit closer. And that sort of thing you have no control over. I don't know that the person on the other end has the same vision of this particular picture that I do, but I send it to them and, kind of hope for the best. And the editors that we have are really good, so most times it's really close, if not what I would do, what I would have done myself. So I've learned to let go of that, and it wasn't hard for me this time. I just do the best job I can. I move them. And then I get to look at my pictures at a much slower pace when I'm back at, my housing, having a Coke and eating some food and just slowing down a little bit to look at them a little closer. Because you're looking at them, at a very fast pace on a 2-inch or 3-inch screen on the back of your camera. Occasionally you send a picture and it actually wasn't even in focus. And so that's why you send more than just one. But, I'm editing so fast, I thought it was in focus, but evidently it wasn't. They might send me a text just saying, hey, that one, it's a little out of focus. You have the frame before that or after that. I'll look. I'm actually, I do, and that might actually be a little bit better, with any luck. And then I'll just send that, a little bit later.
You brought up the concept of storytelling with photos, and I imagine that's somewhat of a difficult thing because generally you got one image to do that, or you might have 1 or 2 sometimes, or 3 maybe online or something, but generally you have one image to tell a story of an event. How do you approach that? Well,
it's harder when you're at bigger events like this because of the restrictions. So, like, for example, the high school typical Friday night football game or basketball game, I get to those games early also, maybe an hour early, and I seek out the coaches. And I'll just say, hey, I'm here to shoot the game and, for the paper, and I would love to be able to show folks a little bit behind the scenes type of thing. And by folks, I mean, it's basically the kids' parents and whoever's reading the paper would be interested in that particular game. So a lot of times they'll let me in the locker room when they're giving the pep talk to the kid, or if they're, going over their strategy on the blackboard and that, or when the kids are just kind of taking a moment to, get psyched up, or they have pre-game ritual or anything like that, and I can really, in a photo gallery, say what happened on that given evening, more so than I can at a big event where I'm limited to maybe 4 places I can shoot from, and I have no communication with the athletes or the coaches. Although even in high school, I don't really bug the athletes. I talk to the coach, and then I just sort of hang out like a fly on the wall. But storytelling images, it's just, did you get it when they did that move that got them the gold? Or, the one I can think of is the American skater. She did a triple axel, and then she celebrated right after that, and then she really celebrated at the end of her routine. And I have a picture of her spinning in the air, and then I have a picture of her after she landed. She had this big smile and kind of pumped her fist briefly before she finished her routine, and then of course at the end she celebrated. So the picture I have is her up at frozen, spinning with her arms kind of tucked in, and then I have her kind of pumping her fist after that, after she nailed it. And then when she was done with the routine, she celebrated, and then she kind of took a lap around the rink, and I saw that she was coming close to where the rings were, and I positioned, the focal length of the lens I chose so that all you saw was her from the waist up with a big smile on her face, and all you saw in the background was just the 5 Olympic ring, the rings of the Olympics, which big smile on the face. She had a really good routine. It shows that she's at the Olympics because of the rings. It kind of all came together there. That's about as much as you can do, at least for what I'm doing.
That brings up a kind of interesting point. When you're watching a sports event on TV, it seems like there's always an iconic moment of the game or the match or whatever it is, and there's usually a turning point moment, like landing that jump, as you were mentioning. And as a viewer, I think that kind of creates a subtle expectation of what the photo is going to be that would be in the newspaper tomorrow, or that's going to be online with the story. And I'm wondering how that plays into, what you do. How do you deal with that expectation? Do you subvert it in some situations, or is it something that you're not even thinking about?
I'm not really thinking about it. I'm just putting my best effort out there. And quite frankly, like this, I've got great colleagues here, and then also with the USA Today crew, and they understand that just because you see it on TV, TV is a flowing, motion thing. You're going to see everything. And that millisecond where they're at the peak moment is such a fleeting moment. It's easy to capture on TV because the camera's just consistently running. And they've got, 12 different cameras with different angles. But when you're one person on your own with just a still camera, that's not as easy a thing to capture. You hope you get it, and you might be close sometimes, and sometimes you might nail it. But, to watch it on TV, those are unrealistic expectations when you're looking at, 15 different camera angles, but you only have one photographer there. So, I can't remember the last time I had an editor or somebody say, "Hey, we saw this on TV. Did you?" Because I think they understand that, we're prepared as best we can, and hopefully we got it, but we're not there with 15 cameras at 15 different angles. Football is actually a good example. For Packer games, we actually have 4 to 5 photographers there because we're trying to get more than one angle on a play and sort of better our odds. And so we kind of cover the football game in quarters. We have 4 guys each taking a corner of the end zone, and then we have what we call a floater, and that guy has a little freedom to kind of take some risks, maybe go up in stands or be more on the sidelines. And then the other 4 have it sort of, so you're responsible for that section of the field. And, the guy across from you just has a little bit different angle of that. So, that's how we help ourselves out in that situation. We staff it a little bit better. But you can't always have 4 or 5 people at an event.
During the event, you're busy and you're taking photos. You kind of like editing photos in your mind, I'm assuming, and then kind of picking some out, sending them back, and all that. But do you ever get a chance during the Olympics to just be wowed by the athletes?
Yeah. For me, yes. I mean, I'll get like, how would I say? I can feel the electricity in the room, kind of thing, and I can enjoy, appreciate what's going on. I mean, I guess maybe I've been doing a long time, and I can focus on what I need to do, but appreciate what's happening in front of me at the same time. I've had goosebumps, before when something happened in front of me. Now it might be that initial reaction afterwards, I photographed what just happened, but I saw it happen from, at least from my perspective, and then I'd be like, ooh, that was really cool, kind of a thing. So yeah, I can appreciate what's happening. It might be a different timing or a different perspective than someone who's watching it on TV, but I certainly walk away from these events, with chills, and I know when something's monumental and it means a lot to somebody, and I can feel the vibe in the stadium or the the arena or what have you, and that doesn't get lost on me for sure. I am able to soak that in. That's what's cool about the Olympics is that it's awesome because you get to do these events at the very peak level of athleticism, and then when you're done, you got to go try to get something to eat and then try to go to bed. And I tell you, your adrenaline is just so pumped up because it was such an electric atmosphere that how do you come down from that? It takes a little while. So, I am able to take that in.
Could you maybe pick one moment out from this Olympics that stands out to you that you were just kind of blown away by the athlete or the moment?
Well, I had never photographed figure skating before. And I guess I kind of looked at it going into it as more of a dance kind of a thing. And, there's portions that are actually called dance routine. And so I had a better appreciation of the balance between how athletic it is and how graceful it is. And it's grace and power all at the same time. And I'll be honest, I don't know if there was one particular athlete, but during the individual figure skating, you add the dramatic music to it, and then just the power and the grace all at the same time. And I had some wow moments. I was really into it while I was shooting it because it was just breathtaking. Really, it was just really cool. I didn't think it would affect me the way it did because I didn't really have appreciation of it before, but I certainly did afterwards. And I'm going to guess that the guys were like, he's talking about figure skating, how cool with this and very excited about it, and like never thought he would get into figure skating that much. But I tell you, until you're there in the moment, just a few yards away from them, all the expression and the music and the power and the grace, that's what I really enjoyed that a lot. I think that was my favorite thing with figure skating, and that it caught me off guard.
A lot of times when you're photographing something, sometimes there's like a moment that you just don't get and you just like kick yourself for not getting. Yeah, I know that happens to me all the time.
Yeah.
Did you have like one of those moments at the Olympic or a couple of those moments at the Olympics this year that like you had a shot in your mind?
I have those moments on a daily basis, I think. But thankfully there wasn't like, the jump or the, thing that happened that was right in front of me and I just missed it. I had some of the jumps from from figure skating because I hadn't done it before. I would have my camera turned vertical and the male would pick the female skater up and like toss her into the air, and he would toss her like left to right. And my camera was, vertical, so like he would toss her right out of the frame, and I'm like, oh my god, that would have been a really cool picture of her hanging in the air. So then I switched to horizontal, and then the next throw they do, he just throws her straight up in the air, and all I have is this guy with his arms up in the air, and there's no other skater because they just did the opposite. So I had those moments until on the first day of it, until I remembered what Bob Deutsch, he's a USA Today photographer that was there with me on that assignment. But he told me that when they warm up, they do their big moves in roughly the same spot on the ice that they're going to do it in the routine. So he said, at least for the Americans, watch them during their warm-up, and you'll see where they're going to do what. And my goodness, that was like a game changer for me, because then I'm like, all right, I know when they get to the right here that he's going to lift her instead of toss her, lift her straight up. So I'm going to be shooting vertical for this. And the next one, he's going to be kind of tossing her to the left. So I'm going to be horizontal so I can get them both in the picture. So there was like that sort of thing where I missed some of those, but I was able to correct it. And then I had one event, bobsledding, where, we had some photographers that were not, in my mind, really following the agreed rules of where we're supposed to be and not leaning out and that sort of thing. And so I had American bobsledders. They were females that were coming in, and these guys just started leaning out. So half my pictures just have the back of the head of the photographers, the two photographers in front of me. That doesn't get me any less upset about it, but it certainly was not in my control because I didn't expect them to do that. So I had that one day. But other than that, it wasn't too bad.
As you've been talking, it occurs to me that a lot of the work in getting a great photo for you at a sports event happens hours before.
Yeah, I mean, we all try to prepare as best we can for an event, whether that's just preparing for the elements or the approach you're going to do. You know, there's some decisions that you have to make that you're going to stick to it for better or for worse, and hopefully, you know, by preparing ahead of time, you're putting yourself in a better situation, and then when that moment happens, that you're performing just like the athlete, and you're able to pull it off. One of the things that, you know, I was photographing the final day of curling. It was Sweden against South Korea, and I was trying to figure out, okay, what end they were going to end up on. And if it played out the way it did, I was on the end that they should finish on. But if they're losing, you know, the other team can concede and they could end on the other end. And that's what ended up happening. But earlier, I had noticed that there was a gentleman on a Steadicam, which is like, you know, a TV camera that's connected to the person, so they're real mobile. And there was a boom camera on the one end. And a bunch of photographers moved down to that end because they could sense that the team was going to concede. And they wanted to be closer to the action or the reaction. And I looked at it again. I'm like, I see those two TV guys there. And, you know, I think for better or worse, I'm just going to stay here on the opposite end and use a telephoto lens and avoid being blocked by those two TV guys. And so in this case, it worked out nicely for me. I have a picture of the Swedes celebrating, and in the foreground, and the Koreans are kind of hugging each other. And I didn't get blocked by anybody. Now, I didn't see anybody's photographs from that end, so they maybe even had a better angle, but I have to guess at least a handful of them had to be blocked by these TV guys because those guys never moved, you know. And so that was me just thinking ahead and then started sizing up the situation in the last few seconds while I could. Do I stay or do I run down there and go by all the other guys? And I decided to stay put. And that particular time worked out for me, you know. Next time, maybe the TV guy stands right in front of me. You never know.
How did you get into photography? Was it kind of always the plan to be traveling the world and taking pictures of the Olympics? How did you get into this?
No, when I was in 8th grade, a friend of mine, his name is Steve Perlstein, we went to Mapledale Middle School, and he had a Canon AE1. I think it was his father's, actually. He had it at school, and I was just fascinated by it. I was just into artwork. He actually let me take it home for one day. He probably doesn't remember this. And I got to play around with it. I thought it was just the coolest thing ever. And so I gave it back to him. And that summer before my high school, I went to Nicolay High School. I got a newspaper. I delivered the paper for the Milwaukee Sentinel. And I saved up enough money to buy a Pentax camera. And I just got it kind of hooked from there. And I did the usual yearbook and high school newspaper for Nicolay High School. That just progressed. From there, at that point, I knew I wanted to do something in photography. I just didn't know what. And I ended up going to UW La Crosse and was taking all these photo classes. And I had a professor, Gary McDonald, who said, hey, you know what? You're getting good grades and all this, at least in my photo classes. And but you need some focus. So he asked me to commit to him for one semester to put together a portfolio. And then he helped me get an internship at a newspaper out east in Connecticut. And once I had the experience of working at a newspaper, I was hooked there. And that's kind of how it started.
You really love the newspaper business, a business that hasn't necessarily been too kind to photographers in the last few years?
It's been rough, but I've loved every minute of it. And I don't see in my mind, I don't see me doing anything different than that. I mean, I've never had a job that wasn't photography related. It was either delivering papers or I was working in a camera shop while I was in high school and college. And then working at newspapers once I got out of college. And I would like to do that, you know, until I retire. And I don't see myself doing anything. But it's you know, I still, for me, my daily newspaper is a reflection of my community, and we're trying to show our community. And I love the community I live in, and I can't imagine doing anything other than that. And it has been tough. It's been hard to see, you know, in the newspaper industry in general, just the reductions and the changes. And some of the changes have been very good and some not. And I'm just trying to embrace those changes and do the best I can within that and just do good work.
So what was your first event that you photographed when you got back?
I did a girls' high school basketball game. I think it was a sectional game.
Was it kind of surreal to go from the Olympics to girls' high school basketball?
No, I actually I love shooting sports in general, and basketball court is a basketball court, I mean, that is an extreme difference, I know, because you're talking about an international level and then a local level. But I really, I just put the same effort in before I left and was when I came back. So I had a good time and made a couple of nice photos, I hope, while I was there and enjoyed it.
Do you have any other reflections on the experience of covering the Winter Olympics?
Well, I really enjoyed the people that I met, and that's a combination of, there were some old friends there that I had photographed previous Olympics with. There were some people that I hadn't met before, but the people of Korea I really enjoyed. They were very welcoming and friendly, and really made you feel like you wanted to be there. And, everything from trying new foods to, we don't have a lot of time. You have to understand that, we are there to do a job, and they're long hours, and there's no days off really as far as whole days. But we had, 2 or maybe 3 kind of half days where, hey, I don't have to photograph something until 7 o'clock tonight, which means I don't have to be there till about 4 or 5. So I'm going to get up early and go. We went to some farm market type places, or we went down to the ocean and checked out the ocean. We were able to eat at local restaurants. So we had a couple of days like that, and that was just enough to give you a sense of what the country was like and enjoy the people, and that was a big difference. I really enjoy being able to experience the culture a little bit on there.
They call the Olympics an Olympic movement, and there's a lot of cultural things that happen around the Olympics and where they are, and the exchange between countries that are sometimes enemies or foes. You have, in this situation, you had North Korea and South Korea meeting kind of over the Olympics, in the Olympics. I'm just kind of curious, how you feel. Do you kind of drink that Kool-Aid, get into the idea of the Olympic Games as a movement, as something larger, as something bigger?
Well, I don't know if I'm drinking the Kool-Aid, but I will say this, that one thing I've noticed, and I've only done 3 of them, but all 3, the one thing that was consistent is that I found that the people that were participating in, and I'm not talking like the big decision makers and that sort of thing, I'm just talking about folks like me, or they're covering it, or the fans and the crowd and the athletes themselves. It was just kind of neat to come together. There was nothing else there. You just focused on the event and the person in front of you, and everybody brought their own sort of patriotism to their country, and it was neat to see people in the crowds that were from countries, that were sitting next to each other that maybe would normally, at least politically, not get along. And there was none of that. They were smiling and shaking hands and trading pins and all kinds of stuff and cheering on for their athletes, but not being disrespectful to the athletes that they were going up against as far as the fans and all that goes. So I like it. I just think it brings people together, at least the people that are at the venue in the moment, for something that's just pure, I guess. So I'm going to explain covering Olympics to me was like covering 16 Super Bowls or 17 Super Bowls in a row. Super Bowl is a long, tiring day, and it's back to back, not much sleep, and because you're at these events late into the evening sometimes, or you're getting out at odd times, the availability of food can be limiting at times. And so you're hungry, tired, and this and that, and you get done with it, and people say, oh, I don't think I'd ever do that again. And then you ask them 3 days later, they're ready to go, because it's the most exhilarating thing you could possibly do as far as sports photography goes. And I don't think anybody who's done one would not want to do another one. So it's exhausting, but it's worth every exhausting second.
That was pretty cool to get some behind-the-lens details. I appreciate Dan's time. Last week he was busy covering girls' state basketball. You can find his work at postcrescent.com and on his Twitter feed at PowerPicks with no E. Make sure to subscribe to the Wisconsin Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, or Google Play. You can stay in the loop about the pod by visiting wispod.com and following the show on Twitter at WisPodcast and on Facebook at the Wisconsin Podcast. Cheers.